Good morning. It's Wendy Johnstone from Family Caregivers of British Columbia, and welcome to our Facebook Live. This month's theme is around caregiver burnout and feeling stuck, and we wanted to talk about the importance of self-care, even help define a bit about what caregiver burnout, or sometimes we talk about compassion fatigue, some of the warning signs of stress are, and the idea of taking 5-10 minutes for self-care, and the importance of that, and just some ideas around that. So caregiver burnout, or sometimes what we talk about on many of our calls on the caregiver support line and coaching, is this idea of compassion fatigue, which is this sort of deep physical, emotional exhaustion that's brought on by sort of this intensive periods of caregiving. And often caregivers who are experiencing this will talk about feeling really vulnerable and feeling really overwhelmed. And so whether we use the term compassion fatigue or caregiver burnout, or even these warning signs of stress, which we'll get to in a second, individuals that experience this level of fatigue, burnout, they'll have a really hard time maintaining this healthy balance in their own lives, and they'll find it also really hard to let go, and they'll often continue to push themselves until they reach a point where their own physical and mental health really starts to be impacted. So some of the signs of burnout, of this compassion fatigue, is a real physical, mental, and emotional level of fatigue, where it can be really difficult to maintain insight into how the situation's affecting us as a caregiver, as an individual. And sometimes it can be really preoccupying. The role of caregiving can often sort of take over the day, and it can be really difficult to even have insight into how the caregiving is affecting ourselves. Sometimes, other signs are just this feeling of exhaustion, experience our own illness, or if working, having to take more time off work, the sense of feeling that even when you've had a good sleep, you're still really tired. Sometimes also this idea of burnout, compassion fatigue, too much, a high level of stress. Often we find ourselves feeling a bit forgetful. We're making errors. We're having challenges making decisions. We aren't taking as much interest in activities that we previously enjoyed. Can often feel like there's a loss of hope as well. So the other area that we just wanted to touch on was this idea of caregiver stress, because not all caregivers experience burnout and fatigue, and although it's the theme, sometimes there's also these warning signs along the way, and so trying to bring awareness into what some of those warning signs are around stress, I think, is also really important. So, and there's a bit of overlap, you'll see. So obviously the stresses of caregiving can often accumulate over time, and typically both compassion fatigue and burnout and caregiver stress, it can generally, the reason why it comes up to the surface or becomes more prevalent, is that when we do neglect, or when we don't spend the time to look after our own mental and emotional and physical health, it often catches up with us. So some of these stressful situations or these triggers, they can happen slowly, and it can often make it really difficult for burnout to be identified. And we've spoken about this before in the past, where we're quite resilient as human beings, and as we continue to take on little bits of more responsibilities, or caregiving, the role of caregiving changes and evolves over time, we're doing more and more and more, it can sometimes be difficult to see those big changes because they've happened gradually over time. But some of the the signs of caregiver stress, of course, is that you're not enjoying your own social activities and friends and activities. It's difficult, for you to be able to plan and make and stay committed to certain events and activities. It can be behavior, kind of mood changes, and more irritable. It can be more difficult to concentrate to get things done. You have trouble sleeping. You can have some physical changes in your body, more pain, just difficult changes in your own physical health. You might be feeling more anxious or depressed about the situation. Other physical signs can be, we talked about headaches and pains, just because your body's not being able to find a way to properly release additional tension and stress. And often caregivers themselves experience illnesses, either with minor or major ailments. So this idea of, and also this idea of feeling stuck, sometimes we might even know that something's not right, but we're not exactly sure what that is. And so when we're feeling stuck, one of the things that our team often talks about in the resources, but also even as a group, as a caregiving group, and we all bring different lenses to caregiver support and caregiver education, is that awareness is really one of the first ways to provide self-care. So just bringing awareness into how we're feeling and how we can try to name how we're feeling. So for example, even asking yourself, okay, I am overwhelmed by, an example, might be, I'm overwhelmed by when, my husband has a urinary, accident. It's not his fault, but I then have to change the, entire sheet set at 2:00 in the morning, and I'm so tired, and it just overwhelms me, the amount of work that is required, physical work. The other thing one can ask themselves is, okay, I recognize the following signs in myself. So another example would be, okay, so I recognize the following signs. I'm becoming much more short and irritable, with my father-in-law, as his dementia is, progressing, and my workload at work is increasing, and I'm having a harder time managing the two simultaneously. So I'm noticing that I'm much more short and irritable with my father-in-law. Recognize some of the following warning signs of stress in myself. I'm not sleeping well at night. I might have a difficult time falling asleep at night. Might take me, too long, or I fall asleep and then I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm not able to go back to sleep because my mind is racing with thoughts, and I'm feeling as though I'm thinking about all these potential situations with caregiving. So just bringing awareness into our caregiving situation can also just really help give us some insight into some of those areas that we're struggling with. We have some really good resources around checking in with ourselves as a caregiver, and we'll make sure those get listed in the presentation or in the comments below. I want to talk a little bit about resiliency because it's so closely aligned with self-care and being able to bounce back from stressful situations. So resiliency is this ability to become healthy again, to bounce back after a challenging situation or after being stretched. And so some questions to ask ourselves and how it relates to self-care is how do we maintain our self-care, or how do we stay resilient in challenging times? So an example might be just recently had a caregiver call in, and she's working full time. She's caring for an aging a parent that has some mental health and substance abuse challenges, and her husband was having to have surgery. And so the surgery was this sort of new additional piece, and so she knew that they were going to be really stretched. And she talked about what keeps her resilient, and we often talk about this, and I often talk about this as kind of what are our non-negotiables for ourselves. And so for her it was she has their lovely family pet, and it is a morning walk with the pet, and it can either be with a friend, or it will also be, or she will listen to a podcast. And that just kind of sets her day. It gives her, that 25 minutes that really helps shape her day and keep her resilient, because she gets out. It's a good walk. It's either a social piece, or it just allows her to think about something other than caregiving. So this idea of that using self-care is a way for us to maintain resiliency. And I'll just also bring up that there's a really great flip book on resiliency. It has a check-in, and it also has some ideas on the different areas of resiliency and ideas on how we can use self-care to maintain resiliency. So sometimes it seems like we're a broken record at Family Caregivers of BC, and we talk about putting our oxygen mask on first, and it is just a really important analogy that all of us truly believe in, and we try to apply it in our own caregiving situations, in our own daily lives. Is that self-care, however that looks, is really important for our ability to continue to care for the person that we're caring for. I think it was interesting. Yesterday I was listening to the radio, and they were talking about this recent study that came out, and of course I can't remember the study, but it was out of the UK, and they were talking about the importance of something that you can do in 5 minutes or 15 minutes has a great impact on self-care. And so I was thinking about that and how that relates to family caregivers, and this idea of asking yourself, even just trying to list 3 to 5 activities that you can do in 5 minutes, and 3 to 5 activities that you can do in 15 minutes. And I don't have any specific examples from a caregiver at my fingertips, but I was thinking about, in our own daily living activity with, caregiving for a frail population, and, working full time, parenting, household, that type of stuff. And a couple of 5-minute activities that I like to do is I have a meditation app, and they have a series of 5-minute meditations, which I love. So that's one of my go-tos. The other one for me is a cup of tea or coffee, and just sitting for 5 minutes looking outside my window are kind of my 2 go-tos. And some 15-minute activities is I have I've got a loop around my home that is a 15-minute walk. So if I don't have much time to do some proper physical activity that I like to do, then I do have a 15-minute loop, and it goes past the mailbox, which is great. So I pick up the mail on the way home. And another one for me is a mobility program, because I have to sit a lot, and I find I get stiff, and I find the more I get stiff, just kind of the grumpier I get. And so it's a 15-minute program, and it's available daily if I want to. I never quite get to it daily, but I strive for about 3 days a week. And so those are my 15-minute activities. I just wanted to share, just some ideas. So thinking about that for yourself, so what can I do in 5 and what can I do in 15? And I think this idea that even 15 minutes each day, or even 5 minutes each day, will have this incredible cumulative effect on your self-care. That even that, for some people that say that's not very much, but actually it is showing that even taking that amount has a positive effect on our health. So the idea that self-care, and there's lots of other activities, and we've written a number of blogs. I know we have a podcast on the importance of self-care that where we talk about what that looks like. And I think it's really important to note that it's very personal to us, and what helps identifying where you're feeling overwhelmed, or where you're noticing stress or tension in your body or in your life. Those are going to be some really good cues on what type of self-care is going to best support you. And there's lots of research and literature on the importance of self-care and how it helps us. So for example, 15 minutes, or even a brisk walk for 15 minutes, or a walk for 15 minutes, can really help manage stress and anxiety. Spending time in just a quiet activity, whether it's listening to a bit of music, meditating, mindfulness practice, reading, whatever that is really helpful for us to give our brains a break, to help recharge. I think one of the other really important pieces of self-care where possible is staying really involved in other aspects of your life and maintaining these connections with families and friends. If you can, being able to share information with your support group on how you're doing, trying to stay active and involved in activities outside of caregiving. Of course, if it's something that you would benefit and you enjoy groups, taking part in a caregiver support group is always helpful. And so I just wanted to finish up by saying that caring for someone with major health issues, chronic illnesses, it's a full-time job, and it's impossible. Typically, it's impossible for one person to do it all on their own. So where possible, reach out for help and support. Trying to think about putting your own oxygen mask on first, as much as possible. It's a practice. It takes time, and we just want to continue to support you and remind you in your own personal self-care. So the other thing I wanted to mention just before we wrapped up is that we do have a personal caregiver support plan flipbook that was just released earlier this year, and there's some really good worksheets, and what they'll help you do is identify what some of your caregiver needs are. They'll kind of get at the root of what would be most helpful to you right now in this situation. Another thing you could ask yourself is, what would a mini rest or break look like? However that looks like. For some people that's an hour, for some others that's a weekend, and for others that's a week. but just asking what would that mini rest or break look like. Even just starting those conversations can be really helpful. So I think as we finish off, I think what we want to also remind our caregivers who are watching that you're doing a really great job, which is very difficult because all of us who are caring for the people that require support, we care about their well-being, and everyone needs time off, a respite from caring, and it's really important to provide ourselves with that kindness to ourselves as we would provide to another person in a similar situation. So I thank you for watching. I hope you're having a great week. It's hard to believe that we're getting towards the end of August, and before we know it, September is going to be here. So I will see you all back in September, and until then, enjoy the rest of the summer. Bye for now.